Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Sending my greetings from a very chilly Nairobi. I hope you can all hear me. Before I introduce today's discussions, I would like to inform our French-speaking participants that we have French translation. So please click on the translation icon at the bottom on the far right of your screens. It should be ready by now. And so it is an immense pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, which is the 5th in a series that seeks to dissect the concepts of environment, peacebuilding, and transitional justice. These webinars have been made possible through the generous support of and partnership with Sarah Hamel from the Bosch Alumni Network, which we refer to as BAN, and the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, in short, EnPAx. These webinars are from a project known as Environment, Peacebuilding, and Transitional Justice, and involves regional discussions across Africa to understand the interconnectedness between the environment, natural resources, and justice in communities and societies that have experienced conflicts which ended up ravaging their natural resources or are related to the access, use, and ownership of natural resources. Certainly, we cannot deny the irrefutable link between protection of the environment, natural resources, and the protection of civilians. All of them require protection, rehabilitation, and restoration for survival and as an aspect of peace building. It is when we degrade the environment and mismanage the natural resources that conflicts arise. Thus, the need for diverse actors involved in post-conflict societies to adopt environmentally sensitive approaches in their peace initiatives. It is laudable that peace efforts have continued to take root within the African continent through various mechanisms to enable societies' transition to peace and stability. However, these mechanisms, including transitional justice, should not overlook the nexus between environment, peace, and stability. To support transitional justice efforts or mechanisms, the African Union has developed the African Union Transitional Justice Policy, which for the purposes of these conversations, we shall refer to as AUTJP. So this series of webinars discussions will highlight the implementation of this transitional justice policy that was launched in 2019 as it concerns environmental justice, rehabilitation, and restoration in our societies, and especially in the process of transitioning from conflict to peace and stability. The discussions will also inform the development of guidelines that seek to highlight the need to incorporate environmental justice in transitional justice processes for sustainable peace and development. Leading us into these discussions that focus on the West African region are two panelists by the name Naji Nelambaye and Samuel Griffo. I hope I have not massacred your names. And also to alert all the participants that the YouTube links of these webinars, and not just today's, will be shared once available. But now I take this opportunity to invite Carl Broch. Please bear with me if I mispronounce your name, who is the president of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. Like I have said, they have been of immense support, and they are the reason that we are able to host these webinars through their generous support, for him to give us a few remarks. Without much further ado, Mr. Carl Broch, welcome.
Thank you, Agatha. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for starting off this session. This is one in a series of events that the Bosch Alumni Network, in partnership with the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, are undertaking to look at experiences and perspectives on transitional justice and environmental peacebuilding in Africa. And it is a great pleasure to have the panelists today, and particularly Samuel and Griffo. I have known Samuel since 1996, and you know, we did some very interesting work in Cameroon and elsewhere over the years. What I find so interesting here is that that was not environmental peacebuilding work. That was environmental governance. And much of my career, it started out with environmental governance. It's been shifting to environmental peacebuilding. But I find at times it's hard to distinguish between environmental governance and environmental peacebuilding. That environmental peacebuilding does really emphasize the peace and conflict dynamics, but often conflict arises from bad governance. So these are really linked. And I think we are blessed to have Samuel and others here today for this session. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And I would like to thank Munini and her team for pulling together this incredible series of events. They are being recorded so that they will then be posted on YouTube, and we find that we get a lot of people also viewing the videos after the fact. So I'm really looking forward to this, and back to you, Agatha.
Thank you, Mr. Bruch, for the remarks. I'll now hand over the moderation to the brains behind this project, as Mr. Bruch has said, Munini Mutuku. Enjoy the discussions, and I am certainly looking forward to having this conversation as we also continue with the series of webinars. Munini, welcome.
Thank you, Agatha. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and thank you, Carl, for those remarks. I would like at this juncture to invite our first panelist, but just to mention that please use the chat function. As we continue with the discussion, if you have any questions, use the chat section to ask any question that you may have, and we'll ensure that that is attended to. So our first panelist today is Samuel Griffo, like Carl Brook has mentioned, who is a lawyer in Cameroon and a manager of the Center for Environment and Development in Yaoundé. He was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize in 1999 for his efforts on protection of the tropical rainforests of Central Africa. Griffo has devoted himself to the Herculean task of stopping the liquidation of the region's forests for short-term profit. He served as an elected member of the board of the Forest Stewardship Council, an international organization that brings together environmentalists and logging companies in order to promote standards for environmentally safer logging practices. He has also practiced in the World Bank initiative to bring the CEOs of logging companies, conservation organizations, and representatives from developing countries together. The sole representative from Africa, Griffo spoke out for the rights of communities in tropical rainforest regions. Griffo is also a member of the Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide, a network of environmental lawyers from 50 countries. So I can bet and I can assure you we're going to have a very interesting discussion following the immense experience of Samuel in the work of environment, justice, governance, and peace building. Samuel, it's your time. Kindly take the floor and share with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Munini. Thank you, Carl, and thank you to all the team for putting this event together. I am really honored to be here and to be taking the floor at this time for sharing some ideas. I really look forward to the discussion that will be following. I don't know if you are listening. Can you get me?
Yes, we can hear. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I will try to share my screen. I have prepared some notes. Oh, I can't share the screen, right?
Not
We'll
yet.
give you our screen sharing capabilities. One moment.
Oh, it is said the guest has disabled.
All right, go ahead and try it now, Samuel. Are you able to share your screen now?
Okay, perfect. Okay, up. So, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the point is to say that in Central Africa, like everywhere else in Africa, we have a very clear connection between environmental injustice, natural resources management, poverty, conflict, scarcity. And Cameroon is not the only case where this is happening. So looking at Cameroon, I will be talking about Cameroon and from time to time talking about other countries in West and Central Africa. We are a resource-rich country, like many other countries in, well, not many, all the countries in Central Africa. And we have a lot of oil, solid minerals, we have forests, we have fisheries, and we also have a lot of land, arable land. And because of that, our economy is built on those resources. A resource-rich country is a country where natural resources exploitation provides more than 25% of the state revenue. And for us, and many other countries, more than half. We have a very huge cultural and environmental diversity. And when you look at Cameroon, it is often presented as Africa in miniature, because we have all the ecosystems that we have in Africa. We have the Atlantic Sea, we have the mountains with Mount Cameroon, 4,000 meters high. We have the tropical forest, we have the savanna. So basically all the ecosystems that you find in Africa are represented in Cameroon. We also have very huge diversity, and people often say with the 250 tribes that we have in Cameroon, people say that the Babel Tower was in Cameroon, probably. But despite this environmental and cultural diversity, we have a common characteristic. All the tribes, all the populations in the country highly rely on natural resources and on land for their economy and for their subsistence, making land and natural resources a key component of the economic life in the country. If you don't have access to land or natural resources, you will have a very miserable life. And if you have a lot of land and natural resources, you are likely to be among the wealthiest persons in the country. We, as a country, the government has decided to base our development on land and land-based investments. So the policy in Cameroon is that we want to be an emerging country in 2035. And if you look at the strategies, everything we want to build on is attracting foreign investors on land-based investment, logging, mining, agro-industries. So this is what we are trying to build on. If you look at the neighboring country, Gabon, in addition to these three, they have a fourth one, is conservation. They want to become the leader in conservation in the world and to see how that can be used to provide revenue to the state. But the consequence is the same, or the trend is the same. Building on land and natural resources to have an emerging economy. So selling what we have, attracting people to come in and take what we have and what our people rely on, and try to build a very rich economy on those grounds. It is very difficult to achieve, I will say. The issue here, well, there are many issues, but the most important issue is that what leads to conflict is land and resources scarcity. And what fuels the conflict is increased land and resources scarcity. It's like a vicious circle. We have land and resources. We invite companies to come in and they take huge portions of land and resources, restricting access to many communities and creating land and resources scarcity to those communities. And because of that scarcity, conflict starts, making it more important to secure access to land and resources by those remaining around the places where land and resources grabbing has happened. So they are fighting, they start fighting to secure access to remaining parts of the land and resources after the grabbing. And because of that, they have conflict. And the more you grab the more the conflict exacerbates. So there is, it's not a continuum, it's a vicious circle. And it works in many locations, it works on almost all the resources. What we saw is that the law is not protective enough of communities. The law looks at how to protect investors, how to protect the rights of investors, how to protect, to some extent, the right of the state, but is not taking into account the rights of those who need the land and resources the most, the communities. And the trend we see in many of the resources that we have, and in, I will say, all the countries in Central Africa, the state will go out and look for debt to build infrastructure. We need roads, we need ports, we need dams to provide energy so that we become more attractive to investors, especially in the mining sector where we need a lot of energy. When infrastructure is built, we grab land from communities to build infrastructure. We have, in the past 10 years, grabbed approximately 400,000 hectares of forest for infrastructure building. This forest is claimed by neighboring communities, and they did not receive any compensation for that. So when we build infrastructure, we destroy their livelihood. We restrict their access to their land and resources, and we don't provide a good compensation, a fair compensation. And sometimes we don't even provide any compensation. So they lose everything. And when times for paying back the debt comes, they will be part of the effort to mobilize money to pay back the foreign debt. So they pay a very high tribute. They are not part of the process at the beginning, the decision-making process. The money coming in from the debt does not benefit them. The dams that we build do not bring electricity in villages. The construction will destroy their livelihoods, and paying back the debt, they will be part of it because we will be increasing the taxes, for example. So the cost of living will become higher, and they will be paying part of the price that is needed to pay back the debt. So this is, I will say, the summary of the history of how natural resources are being managed in our country. And I have very quickly 3 showcases that we can see and in which we clearly see conflict. The first case is the Ocean Division. It's a portion of the country on the Atlantic Sea. It's a very beautiful, wonderful place. The main city there is called Kribi. And as you can see on the map here, can you see the mouse moving?
Yes.
Okay, so as you can, this is a map of the division. The total, and these are some statistics, what I want to clearly show, the total size of the division is 1.1 million hectares. The orange parts here are portions that are already allocated by the state to mining, to logging, to agro-industries. And what this does not show is that there is a lot of overlaps between those rights allocated by the state because they are allocated by various ministries, the Ministry of Agriculture for agro-industries, the Ministry of Mines for mining concessions. So at the end, the Ministry of Forestry for logging concessions on protected areas. So at the end of the day, what is allocated is 85% of the size of the division. And the gray areas are the portions that are not allocated. So this is what is remaining. And on those portions of land, we also have a lot of land grabbing happening by the administrative elite, political elite, knowing that the price of land is increasing in the area. They have been going there to register land in their name so that they can sell it in the future and do, well, make a lot of profit. So technically what is left, what is available for the communities in the area is less than 10% of the size of the division. But because of some investment in this area, we are expecting the size of the population to be multiplied by around 5 in the next 7 to 10 years. One of the main reasons is that in this area, we have built the biggest deep sea port in Central Africa, serving Chad, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Northern Congo, Northern Gabon, 5 countries, and attracting a lot of people. A lot of companies are moving their headquarters from other parts of Cameroon to this area and moving their staff to this area. So land is allocated, land rights are allocated. The size of available land, and I put available into brackets, available to communities is totally reduced. And this scarcity will be increased because communities will be coming in, because other people, migrants, workers will be coming in and will be trying also to have a portion of that land. And the land that we have left is supposed to provide food for everybody in the division, housing for the communities, and is clearly not enough. So we have already a lot of conflict in the area between companies and communities, between communities fighting for the remaining portions of land, and within communities, between those who want to sell the land and go somewhere else, and those who want to keep their culture and keep their land. So it's becoming a very chaotic place, and there is no clear role for addressing those conflicts in the area. So this is one case, one quick case that I wanted to share. Let's go to the second case. We could come back to this in the discussion, because what I could say is that this area is also part of the tropical forest. So some of the allocation will lead to forest conversion and has already led to forest conversion with a very huge volume of carbon being released. And this carbon will be counting in the emissions of Cameroon, while the revenue benefits private companies, not the country. So this is part of our carbon deficit, right? But the revenue for this carbon deficit goes in the pocket of a foreign firm, not for us. And this could be another portion of the discussion, because this deficit also creates a financial deficit for us, create an inability on our side, Cameroon as a country, to have access to some of the funds put in place to support the reduction of carbon emissions. But as I said, we can come back to that later. The second case I wanted to share is gold mining. Cameroon is presented as a country with a very high potential on solid minerals. If you look at the map of allocated mining concessions, mining permits, you will realize that 25% of the total size of Cameroon is covered by mining permits, 1/4 of the size of the country, including some cities are covered by mining permits. We are expecting a lot as a country from mining revenue to meet our economic goal of becoming an emerging economy in the next 10 years. But what has started so far is gold mining, and we are not a major gold mining country. So what we have is that mining happens on small permits, not big concessions. And the small mine, what we call small permits is a category between artisanal mining and industrial mining. And it's a category that was created in the law in Cameroon. They also call it semi-mechanized mining. And it's not very clear what is mechanized and what is semi-mechanized. But when you see the result is not semi-result. They are very clear results on the environment with very huge holes in the forest that are left out. I have the impression that this was not the right but I will be showing you some pictures later on. So the process is the following. Companies, especially Chinese companies, come in and they register a company in Cameroon, a small company in Cameroon. They receive funds from the Chinese Exim Bank to start gold mining. They find a local protector who can be either a member of the parliament or a high-level politician, national politician, or a high-level military, colonel, general, and they become partners for the Chinese to get the protection. Then the political exposed person, the general or colonel, the minister, former minister, gets an authorization for a small mining permit. And then they go in the villages and they see where villagers are mining successfully. This gives them an indication of where they can find gold. And then they get a permit on that area and they expel the communities to install their small permit. And then they start digging. And when it's done, they look for another permit and they use the same process to access the permit. So it's a continuous process of expelling small miners, communities from their land and from their successful mining areas. What we know is that these mining practices are very detrimental to the environment and to communities. They leave a lot of holes, and in one of the villages where we did some work, the chief and his elders were able to count approximately 2,000 holes in one village. Some of the holes can have more than 20 meters. And during the raining season, they are totally covered by water, so you don't know if it's a 2-centimeter hole or if it's a 2 meters hole. Many people died in those holes, and many people are dying, still dying. There is a very clear requirement in the law to close the holes once mining is over in the area, but nobody does that. And the public administration does not ensure that the law is complied with by companies. So the place becomes very dangerous to the people, to the cattle, and even to animals in the forest. So this is a time bomb. Many people have been dying. And we counted in one area 300 people who died in the past 4 or 5 years, including in the past month between May and between end of May and early June, 28 people died in one single mining hole, So how much money do we get from that? When you look at the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative report of Cameroon, what it says is that Cameroon produced 0.5 ton of gold per year. When you look at the import statistics of gold in some importing countries like the Dubai, the United Arabic State, Dubai, they report that they imported 12 tons of gold from Cameroon in 2018. For that year, Cameroon reported having produced and exported less than 300 kilos of gold. So there is a problem here. There is a lot of corruption. So we, again, the same trend that we were talking about. We cover the cost, the social and environmental cost at the local level, and the economic benefit disappears out of the local level, out of the national level, out of the country. So this is what we have. And if you don't mind, I can quickly show you some of the pictures to end there. These are some pictures of mining. This is the mining site in which 28 people died in 3 weeks. And as you can see, these strings, the place was
Samuel, all we're seeing is the PowerPoint.
Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
That's all we see. We don't see the photos.
You don't see the, okay, let me see. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so this hole is where we had 28 people dying in 3 weeks' time, 2 weeks. And if you see these strings, the hole was closed by the administration because of the accident. And as you can see, despite the decision to close the hole, activities continue. The hole belongs to a Chinese company, and they just did not care. They continue with their activity. What you see here, can you see this man? He's one of the most prominent TV journalists in Cameroon. And behind him is the school where students from this village, the village of this, where this accident happened, are supposed to go. Yeah, you will tell me what you think about it. What you see here is pollution in one river, because all the trash, all the waste from mining operations go into the river. And I have to say, among the trash, you have mercury that is very much used despite the fact that it's formally prohibited by the law, is used by almost all the small mining companies. On this picture, you can see how close the holes go to the houses. Very clearly, the communities will have to leave. Or if they don't leave, their life will become so dangerous. You can't really see how communities can live close to such a dangerous place. So, just to conclude, what can we do? There is a need to improve the legislation. There is a need to improve the case for financial liability of companies and investors. Those destroying the environment, those creating conflict, should be held accountable for that, and we should make sure that they pay, they cover the cost of what they have done. We should impose grievance mechanisms for affected communities. And to conclude, we need to put in place, to support communities in putting in place participatory monitoring of companies and states' commitment in production areas. This is something that we do a lot in Cameroon, supporting communities to generate information that we can use against the companies. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for that presentation. Thank you for that, very well documented with pictures and details. I must say it's also a sad story of what is going on with the mining companies and the holes. And so unfortunate that people are dying while actually there is something that can be done in terms of the existing legislation and holding the companies accountable. Thanks for sharing with us about the reasons why the conflict happens, the scarcity of land and other natural resources. You've talked about the challenges with the legislation and also the challenges with the government in terms of following up to ensure that the legislation is actually respected by the companies that are taking up these activities of mining and extraction of natural resources. You've mentioned the question of the political elite and the involvement in the selling and administration of land, and the question of speculation. You buy so that you can sell it at a higher price later in the future. Land available to communities while the legislation does not support them is also another issue that has come up. Multiple conflicts where we have companies and communities having conflict, communities and communities amongst themselves having conflict, and also companies and companies having conflict because they all want to access the same resources. Revenues and the outflow of resources, of funds that are made or are made as profit during this mining or the sale of the resources that come from mining. And you've also mentioned the mining revenues. How much does Cameroon get? How much goes out? Mining permits and concessions, and also mentioning the question of the effect of mining, which I have said again, the holes and the deaths within the communities, and the fact that communities have to be evicted so that these companies can actually take space and mine. You've talked about the Chinese factor and the need to improve legislation and participatory practices for the communities that are affected and that need to hold these companies and other actors accountable. Thank you so much for that presentation. Very comprehensive, touching on quite a number of issues right there. So thank you to the participants for the questions that have come in. One question that has come in is, you talk about the conflicts that are caused by the scarcity of land and resources. But then again, there's the mention that this is a country that is rich in terms of resources and land. So is the question the scarcity, or is the question the distribution and the management of these resources? Processes of renewing the concession and permits, I think you have mentioned something on that, but let me still pose the question. The question is, what can be done about this renewing of permits and concessions, seeing that the companies are not adhering to the law? Is there a law or a process that allows the government not to renew the permits and concessions because the holes have not been sealed or other environmental issues have not been adhered to? Is it the legislation or the implementation of the legislation that is challenging? You mentioned in your presentation that we need to improve on legislation. So the question that has been asked is it the legislation or is it the implementation of the legislation? The other question is, thank you, Samuel, for an representative narrative. Could you tell us a little about the challenges in community level organization towards demanding political reform and compensation? To what extent is organization actually happening and how influential is it? So Samuel, allow me to just leave the questions at that. And then after you have answered that, we can go to the other questions. Samuel, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. A lot of questions. Let me start by the end. Reforms are happening, and some reforms are supported, promoted by bilateral or multilateral partners of Cameroon and other countries in Central Africa, with the purpose of creating an enabling environment for foreign investment, which is not always what we want. We are not against investment, but we are against investment without any condition, without any control. And this is more and more what is happening. Having laws, natural resources laws that will be creating a lot of rights to foreign investors and not really appropriately taking into account the context in which this investment will be happening. This is a context of corruption, a context of very weak governance, but also a context of very weak communities and public administration, where control cannot happen as is supposed to happen, and where the judiciary is not always strong enough to provide justice to those affected. So there have been some organizations of communities, NGOs, coming together to discuss the land law, for example, and this is an ongoing process. What they are requesting is that their property on land, their customary property, should be formally recognized. Not individual property, but collective property of communities. If this worked, the communities will have the possibility to veto investment on their land. At this stage, the land does not formally belong to communities, so they cannot claim property and they cannot go to court, for example, to prohibit investment that they don't like. So this is a key issue that has to change, the recognition, formal recognition of property rights of communities, and this will give them more standing in case of conflict. The quality of the legislation and the implementation of the legislation are both problematic. In some cases, the quality of the legislation itself is a problem. I just mentioned the fact that communities are not the owners, but I should also mention the fact that NGOs and communities cannot go to court against the state or against a company that is violating the environment because of this civil code system, civil law system, where you need to prove standing, you need to prove quality to act, and they will say if you are not the owner, you cannot act. And if you are trying to act on behalf of the public interest, it's the responsibility of the state to do it. So you are not qualified. This is a major obstacle to an improved control of the actions of companies, of the state, on the environment, on natural resources. And this is something that has to change. This is quality of the law. On another point is the quality of the implementation, where, for example, the law says you are obliged to close the holes after mining, and the holes are not closed. But again, the civil servant not pushing the company to close the hole knows that the community cannot go to court against the company for that. They know NGOs cannot go to court because the judge will say it's not your responsibility, it's the responsibility of the state. So the quality of implementation is very much connected to the quality of the content. And I think if you have better laws, there are some few provisions that need to change to improve access to justice, to push different actors, including NGOs and community citizens, to oblige the administration to request compliance with the legislation. And this is connected also to the fact that even if everything is known, and these cases were on TV, on the news, everywhere in the newspapers, the government still will be renewing the permit if this happens. And the reason is that nobody will have standing to go to court against them. And the judge will not be receiving such a claim, again, because of the quality of the system in which we are. So this is what I can say. We are in Francophone Africa. We are in a very different legal system than Eastern and Southern Africa, where I think access to justice is more organized, more open. You also have your problem, and I recognize that, but you are far better than us in Francophone Africa, I will say, with these regards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Allow me to repeat this question. I'm not sure if you've answered it, but if you have, just let me just say you've answered it.
Okay.
Tell us a little about the challenges in community level organizations towards demanding political reform and compensation.
Okay.
To what extent is organization actually happening, and how influential is it?
Okay. For many years, communities were Can you hear me? For many years, communities
Yes, we can, Samuel. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Involved in conflicts with companies and the state, but without really being able to act. More recently, I will say in the past 2 years, there is a trend everywhere in the country where communities tend to resist more. I personally think this is a consequence of increased land scarcity. They know that huge portions of land are going out, and they are fighting very strongly to keep the remaining portions of land that either the government or companies are trying to grab. Last year, 2020, between May and August, altogether, the size of land protected by communities fighting in various parts of the country was 300,000 hectares. I'm talking about land on which the government had already taken decisions either to grant it as a land concession for agro-industry or to establish it into a logging concession with the purpose of being converted into large-scale land concessions for agro-industries. So in all those cases, communities stood up and were very strong in voicing their concerns. Okay, some NGOs were also very supportive, bringing journalists, exposing the case. And I have to say that the government tried to use the excuse of the COVID and all the restrictions, the COVID-related restrictions in movement, in meetings, to push through some of those decisions. But despite all that, communities were able to fight back. So I think we have moved from a time when communities were very passive to a time where they are fighting, really fighting back very strongly and very quickly in a very organized way to get their rights being recognized. And as I said, between May last year and August, 300,000 hectares were protected. And this is huge, totally unprecedented in Cameroon. So the point now, the major weakness stays into turning this fight into a political fight, turning it into changing the legislation. They have been able to change specific decisions on a case-by-case basis, but changing the legislation to make sure that what they want to see is what is in the legislation. I think this is another level that they have not yet reached, and it's something that has to happen if you want to see some change.
Thank you very much. The other question was, allow me to check the other question. The transition to renewable energy is driving conflict is the transition to renewable energy driving conflict in Cameroon? Is any of the mining related to minerals for batteries or solar panels? Is any of the mining related to minerals for batteries or solar panels? Is there any land grabbing for solar, wind, or hydropower?
Okay.
Yes,
I will say not yet. We were fortunate not to have solar, wind, or solar or wind as a major target for our energy policy. So this is not happening. No land grabbing for solar or wind energy. A lot of land grabbing for hydro power. We decided some few years ago, well, around 10 years ago, to go out and try to get money to build dams. And we had 8 dams either to build or to renovate as part of our response to the energy crisis, but also as part of our plan to generate enough energy to be attractive to mining companies. And this resulted, as I told you earlier, in the grabbing of more than 300,000 hectares. Well, if you put together, yeah, more than 300,000 hectares for dams, railway, ports, major routes. Yeah, this is what we lost in terms of forest because of that, including areas that were flooded by the dams or the proposed dams. And of course, this is very clearly land on which ownership is claimed by communities, is places, portions of forest resources that they will not be accessing anymore, and for which they have not received any compensation in kind in land, for example. Yeah, so this is happening. We don't yet have mining for minerals that are used in renewable, what is presented as being renewable energies. But what we know when we look at the potential, the mining potential of Cameroon, we have some few places where we have very clearly resources that will be used for those renewable energies, especially for the batteries in the electric cars. And we are very much afraid of what will happen because we know the size of the international demand for that, and we know these places will be very clearly targeted for permits by foreign companies, but we are not yet there.
Thank you for that response. Another question is, maybe help us get clear, how is the land accessed, owned, or used in Cameroon? Is it community or is it individual? How is the organization of land use and access in Cameroon?
Okay.
And the other question is, when people are able to exhaust local remedies, or the local remedies to certain problems within the society are not being addressed by the judicial system, we have the African human rights system, and especially the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which receives cases, especially related to public litigation issues. So the question is, have the actors within Cameroon tried to access a resolution with the African human rights system?
That's a very good question. The way the land is organized, okay, we have a set of customary rules, traditional laws on land, organizing property and access to land in each of our communities. And our traditional law says land belongs to the community, it's collective property. And within that collective property, we have families owning land, like private property of the family, of a small collectivity. So basically, land is not an individual asset in our traditions. Land is always controlled and managed by a large group, either the community or the family. And when the family, if a family leaves, for example, their land goes back to the community land. This is how it's organized. we were under a German protectorate at the end of the 19th century, and the Germans instituted a new, a law on forest, or a law on land. And that law said land that is not occupied by people is free land that will become the property of the German crown. So this was the beginning of the creation of a new category, the state land. And the German crown was then able to grant some rights, land rights, to individual or companies with a land title, with a registration. This system has worked together with the traditional rights for more than a century now, since the end of the 19th century. And up to now, we have been looking into the statistics. Approximately 20% of the country is covered by land title. That means 80% is not registered and is still claimed by communities to be managed according to the customary law, but claimed by the state to be managed by the state. And this is where all the fight happens. The fight for registration, the fight for allocation, but at the end of the day, it's a state decision to say who will be the owner, the legal owner of that land. So this has resulted into a type of cancellation of the collective property and an emphasis on individual property. And this is what we are seeing so far, more and more. And this is also what is creating the trouble, because as I said, when land scarcity starts, because a huge portion of land, of community land, was allocated to a company, there is a fight within the community members to register the rest of the land so that they don't lose totally. And this fight is a fight between the members of the community, between the members of the family. And it's creating further land insecurity, land scarcity. On the second question, yes, people often, they know that, not everybody, but many people know that when you exhaust local remedies, you can go to the African court, African Commission. But it takes so long, it's so expensive, so difficult to exhaust the local remedies. So sometimes a case will last for 15 years, 20 years between the first instance and the Supreme Court. And will cost so much that people will just give up. We have some cases where communities got organized and went to the African Commission. And one of the cases is the Bakurilan Commission. It's a group of people living on the flank of the Mount Cameroon. And they claim the property of their land that was seized by the Germans at the end of the 19th century and transmitted to the British and to the independent state of Cameroon. And they say that cannot be your land because the person taking it from us stole it, basically. And we have a lot of evidence of that, but still the government doesn't want to give it back. So I think the major problem here is how far the government of Cameroon will recognize a decision taken by the Commission. And as you have seen, some few Francophone countries are more and more reluctant to comply with the decisions of the Commission and the court. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. We still have a few more questions for you. Your presentation is very interesting. It raises a lot of questions about access to resources they use, weak institutions and weak legislation, and the need to do something about it, and the challenges that people and communities go through as they try to address these natural resource-based conflicts or issues that are affecting them. Allow me to give Agatha an opportunity to ask a question. Agatha, please.
Thank you, Munini, and thank you, Samuel, for that very detailed and deep presentation. We have certainly learned a lot, and it's clear that the same problems that you have presented, Samuel, resonate across Africa. And while exploitation of natural resources has often been accompanied by degradation, I'm afraid, and I'm sure that majority of us agree that the Chinese seem to take the trophy for disregarding the rights of not only the people in the areas that are exploiting the resources, but entire countries as a whole to have sustainable and green economy. And this is being reported from other countries like South Sudan's, oil drilling, PRC's mining, amongst many other countries. And there's a trend of disregarding communities when it comes to commercial mining, as you have, taken us through, or when planning for mega projects, which without a doubt are a recipe for conflict. Not only are communities being displaced or negligibly compensated, if at all, but the environment is being degraded at an alarming rate. My worry is that state officials that are allowing such injustices to take place are culpable and do so mostly because they receive bribes and so turn a blind eye, which, that is typical corruption. And this is out of selfish reasons to benefit economically. So my question is, what recourse should communities think of pursuing? Should they explore turning to regional mechanisms? And what I have in mind is the African Court for Peoples and Human Rights over these injustices, now that it's their government actors who are culpable, and that's likely to frustrate such efforts. If seeking recourse at a national level would take place. And what I have in my mind as a recourse is to have the companies that are involved, as well as their culpable state officials, held to account, including compensating entire communities and contributing to rehabilitating and restoring the areas that have been degraded. I hope my question is clear.
Yes, very clear. Thank you so much, Agatha. Very clear, but very difficult to answer also. We have been looking into possibilities to act for communities and for NGOs. We have a long experience in monitoring activities of companies, and sometimes you can hold them accountable by going and discussing with the customers when they get a product through a process that destroys the environment, affect communities. You can go and talk to their buyers and say, look, you can't allow that to happen. We have done it with logging companies with some success. You can also go and talk to those providing the money and telling them, especially when it's public funds, telling them you cannot allow that to happen with your money, like the European Investment Bank, the World Bank, some Exim Bank, European Exim Bank, the US, for example. Okay, we have tried that with more or less success, but at least you have a place where you can discuss with them. You have this OECD mechanism where you can go to the home country of an OECD, a company from an OECD country, and start a process that even if you are not winning a compensation for the affected community, you can use the decision in the media in the home country to tarnish the reputation of the company, and sometimes this will be enough for them to repair what they have done. But with the Chinese, you don't have that. The money comes from a Chinese bank or the Chinese state. The product goes back to China. If it's timber or gold, it goes back to China. So you don't have any information on the buyer. probably is processed there and it goes out to Europe or to the US, but then it's really difficult to trace it back. This makes it very difficult. We have worked with a Chinese NGO who told us there are very clear set of rules that companies operating abroad, Chinese companies operating abroad, should respect. And one of the rules says they are obliged to comply with the national law. And if you were able to bring the evidence that a big Chinese company was not complying with the law, they are likely to lose the support of the embassy. And they are very much afraid of losing that. So they told us if we had evidence as such, we could use it with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and use it with the embassies in the host country. This is in Cameroon. But this only works for very big companies, very big Chinese companies. And in the mining sector, we are talking about very small companies. Sometimes they are not even registered with the embassies. So it's really, really difficult to hold them accountable. The big Chinese companies rely on the state, on their state, to have access to contracts. They need the support of the state to have huge contracts and to have the loan that the Chinese state will provide to the host state to allow the company to, for example, build a dam or build a port. So they are vulnerable with the Chinese authorities, the Chinese government. But at the end of the day, we also have to keep in mind that they are very much part of the Chinese foreign policy. So China will not be willing to blacklist the Chinese company. This will not happen. But they can talk to them to resolve a specific conflict somewhere. But they will not change all the practices of Chinese companies because their foreign policies build on that. They have to provide cheap infrastructure at a high price so that they artificially increase the debt of the receiving countries and can get the payment of that debt that will very quickly become unsustainable. They can get the payment of that debt either through the control of the infrastructure they have built or through the control of natural resources of that country. So the big companies are part of this process, and we have to keep that in mind. But it's something that we are still exploring, trying to understand how it works. Not being able to speak Chinese, not being able to read the laws in China, not being able to have a good network of NGOs in China makes the task very, very difficult for us. That's what I can say on this. Sorry for not being able to provide a solution to that. Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Thank you, Samuel. Thank
Okay.
you. That was adequate. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think Monini has an internet connection problem.
Okay.
But yeah, I think Carl has a question. Carl, I think you can just go ahead and ask.
Sure. Samuel, I'm curious, you've been working on these issues for a very long time. And for those who are new to advocacy, new to helping communities, I'm wondering kind of two questions, actually. One, what would you tell them? How do they not get discouraged and decide to do something else? And two, can you reflect on how it has changed over the years that you have been working on these issues?
Wow. Yes, please.
Hi, Munini has dropped off. I'm trying to get her back on.
Yes.
And I also was, for some reason, I lost you briefly, but we could carry on. I don't know if there were any questions targeting Samuel, or anybody had a comment.
Agatha, I did pose a question, 2 questions to Samuel, and he was about to answer. So
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Carl, thank you. On the first question, from my experience, one of the things companies fear the most is transparency, is to be exposed. Because by exposing them, you can access their market, you can access their funders, and none of them wants to be exposed like that, because companies often take lots of commitments. They make public statements in their home countries, and where very few people know what is happening in their operation site. So if you are able to expose what they do, and especially to show that there is a gap between their commitment, their public commitments, and what they do on the field, they will be very much embarrassed. But on top of that, what I know is that companies are very much afraid of losing money. And they know everything you expose can lead to them losing some money. So they are afraid when they know they are being monitored. They try to hide what they do, or they try to some extent change, not because they have to change, but because they are afraid of losing money, losing markets, losing public support, and things like that. And one of the things we have been witnessing, even when we had the feeling that we had lost the campaign, okay, to say it, I'll just tell you a story. We worked on a project, on a huge infrastructure project. It was a disaster for us. It was terrible. And at the end of the day, the project was finally approved and the construction started and went on. We were monitoring the construction. And we had the sense that we had lost. And at the end of the construction, one of the top managers of the site met with us and said, what you saw, you think it was very bad, but I can tell you, if you were not there, things would have been worse, because many of our colleagues were trying to refrain from doing all the nasty things that they often do, because they knew you were watching and you will be coming across some of those things. So this is, to me, this is the main message. If you are not there, things will be worse. If you are there, do your best to make sure that everything goes in the right way. This is without harming the people, without harming the environment. This is not the trend that companies will be following, because harming the people, harming the environment is very lucrative, and companies are out there to look for money. So if you are not around, people will suffer, the environment will suffer. If you are around and really turning around and making sure that everybody knows you are watching, even if you don't know, they will be a bit more careful. Again, I said this work for African companies, Western companies. We have not yet found the right way for the Chinese companies. On the second question, oh, your second question, Carl, what was it?
How have the different environmental conflicts and your approaches to them changed over the 25, 30 years that you've been working on these issues?
Okay. 25, 30 years ago, you had to convince people that land and resources, taking their land and resources was a major issue. Of course, you had some few people in the community saying, we don't want to give out the land, we are against that. But the majority of the people were fighting for a fair portion of the revenue, not for the land or resources. So it was not a fight for the environment, it was a fight for money, for revenue. 25 years later, 30 years later, is more a fight for the environment because scarcity is very clearly an issue today, and it was not an issue 25 years ago. To me, this is the major difference. When you fight for a fair share of the revenue, it's not the fight of your life, because if you don't get it, you can still survive. When you fight for land and resources because you know you need the land and resources, if you lose, you know you have lost, including your life. Your life will not be the same anymore, it's finished. So the nature of the fight, the intensity of the fight is higher today, and I think it's because of this, this context, this situation, this new perception.
Thank you so much, Samuel. Those are brilliant answers. And I really hope that people reflect on what you have just shared, because I think that there's a lot of merit and insights in that, in those responses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Thank you so much, Carl, for that. My apologies. Our electricity just went off, and with it goes the internet. Sorry for that. Very interesting issues have been raised, and with it also comes the question of the colony. Talked about the Germans and the state land issue of them taking over resources, but also the very interesting issue that you can have the embassy, which I'm not sure many of us within the region are aware. But it's also very unfortunate, like Carl said, well, like it has been mentioned, that these things are happening and actually they should not be happening. Almost 1.5 hours. Unfortunately, our next panelist is not available. He was not able to log in all the way from Chad. We are really sorry for that, but we had with us Nanji, who was going to share with us certain issues from the Republic of Chad and also the West African region. Samuel, to conclude, to finish this discussion, unless there's a question on the chat that I can't see the chat. Sheila and Agatha, alert me if there's a question on the chat. But to conclude the discussion, maybe I can just ask one question to Samuel to wrap us up. Do you, and I apologize if you had asked this because I had logged off for a bit. Do you see hope for justice? Do you see hope for transitional justice as we go on within the continent, especially with these issues that you have raised? And these issues are not unique because the last webinar of Southern Africa that we had last week raised similar issues of companies and mining and the degradation of the environment. So it is, like Agatha had mentioned, it is something that is going on within the African region, which is quite unfortunate. So do you see there being some hope for justice?
Go ahead, Munini. We fixed the echo.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Samuel.
Yeah, if there was no hope, we will not be fighting. I see hope, and I also see that it will not be easy. But we need to have many people fighting to see the hope being materialized into reality. I think more and more people know that there is a problem. more and more people understand either only the economic injustices, saying that the wealth of Africa goes out and bring riches to other parts of the world. So they see the economic injustice. They see the fact that the wealth is not shared in a fair way. Some also see the environmental injustice. But I think we need to continue with the mobilization. We need to continue to talk to journalists, to expose issues in the media so that more and more people know about what are the problems and how to address them and solve them. They need to see the connections between, for example, your electricity going down and the resources that you have, the way the resources that you have in your country are exploited and used, not having as a priority things that are important for your daily life. For example, the more people know this, the more they will be inclined to start searching a solution. And the more people searching a solution we will have out there, the more fights we will be able to win. We also have to expose the successes that we have. I think we have many more successes than what we know, but because they are limited in number, we don't use them enough to give us more hope and more courage to fight. And finally, I think we need to be connected, more connected to each other. The context seems to be very different, but it's not. The trends, the techniques, the mechanisms are the same. All the companies and all the states use the same mechanisms. So we need to be connected so that we share our experiences. This will make us, how to say, gain more time, I will say. I don't need to do my own experience if you have already done it, and you are able to tell me what the companies do to buy time, so that I see when they start doing it where I am, where I work, I already know, okay, I know where they are going and I know how to act. We are not doing this enough. And this is also, I think this is a major problem for us. And we should be using the law a bit more. Communities that I was talking about, they use the law in a very clever way. And they were very successful. They used the media in a very clever way. I told you at the very beginning that one of the things the companies are afraid of is to be exposed. If somebody comes to steal in your house, he will not come at daytime. He comes at night because he's afraid to be exposed. The same with companies. So if you bring the media in, if you make sure that they publish everything that they see, you are likely to have success. The case of the mining site I told you about. The accident happened in mid-May, the 18th of May, the first accident. 10 days later, the second accident. And we had 2 TV companies, the Voice of America, and we had 5 newspapers in Cameroon, prominent newspapers, 3 radios. Going there, we facilitated their trip in the area, their contacts with people, and they were able to do a lot of pieces. This was on the TV news, on 2 stations, on radio, everywhere. And now we are preparing a report that will be published next week to come out with a very clear demand. So advocacy started not by us, but by the media publishing this. And when we come in, the issue would have been in the newspapers for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then NGOs will come in with a clear request. This is how we can be using them, making sure that the public opinion is ready, is prepared, and then coming in with policy demand. Let's do that a bit more. Let's use the media a bit more. We have good stories happening at the local level in villages where the media often don't go. And those good stories are very simple stories. People, it's so simple to understand that this company is hurting that person or that village, and those people are dying and the state is not earning any money, but some few people are earning all the money. This will be frustrating for many people and will be exposing those benefiting from it. And there will be requests to change the policy. So this is how I see it. I think hope is there. We have to push, we have to be strategic, we have to mobilize more and more people. And we have to understand that it will not be easy.
Thank you very much, Samuel.
With your permission, I would like to indicate that I'm standing by for anything I can do. Noya Ben Modika from Cameroon. Thank you.
I did not get your name.
Noya Ben Modika from Cameroon. I was supposed to be interpreter for this session, but thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Ben. We are finishing, unfortunately, but thank you so much for being here.
I would like to have the contact of Ben, if possible.
Yes, we will share the same with you. He's from Cameroon
so
as
I'll
well.
get in touch. Thank you, Ben.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Samuel, for that wrap up. I can't say it any much better. We have a Swahili saying that says, kidole kimoja hakivunji chawa, meaning one finger cannot kill lice. If you get lice in your hair, you can't use one finger to kill it. You need two fingers to squeeze it to kill it.
That's true. That's true.
So we need to work together. Like you have said, we need the connection.
Yeah.
Allow us to appreciate very much the enriching and the enlightening session that you've taken us through. Thank you for talking for more than 1.5 hours. We really appreciate. We hope you get some water, but we will also buy you some water next time.
Thank you
we want
so
to
much.
appreciate the questions from the participants that helped us get more information on what you're sharing and also gave you the opportunity to speak to us more. Next week, we are visiting West Africa. Join us once again, and we'll be talking to Saro Piagbara, who comes from the Ogoni community, and we'll also be talking to a gentleman called Harrison Kwame, who works with the blue economy, issues that have come up even within Cameroon. You talked about the ocean area, so we will be hearing more about that next week. So join us as we continue with the discussion, and we want to continue to appreciate the continued engagement by the participants who have continued to be with us throughout. We also want to appreciate the team has made sure that this webinar happens. Harriet, Shella, and led by Carl Brook, the president of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. And we also want to thank the Bosch Alumni Network, led by Sarah Hamel, for their continued support and for making this possible. We also want to thank the project team who have continued to keep in touch with the panelists for today, and that is Rollin and Miriam. And we also want to repeat and say that the recording will be shared on our webpage. And if you want to listen to the discussions that we had with the South African and the other 2 webinars that we had before, you will also find them uploaded on the website. And we will make sure that this one from Central Africa is also uploaded. We will make sure the one on West Africa is also uploaded so that we can continue sharing, discussing, and seeing what way forward. How do we continue to engage to ensure that our environment is protected, but so much more that we get justice as we continue. Thanks a lot. And with those few remarks, allow me to wish everyone a good evening, a good morning, and a good night wherever we are. And we hope to see you next time. Please remember to join us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mimini.